What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is Bull Season 4, Episode 4, Her Own 2 Feet. So, this one was okay. I do have a lot of questions going forward, though, that most will not get answered. But about the case itself, this really was kind of a weird one at times, because I get the concept, I get, very controlling father. Kind of understandable from his point of view, though, because he sees his daughter needs help because of all the stuff she's gone through, this illness that they found out that she had. It kind of makes sense why he's worried about her and why he would be very protective and trying to be there for her and help her make decisions so that she is well off. The whole concept of why she decides to take this to court and do all this, though, is a little off for me. Because I get the idea she wants to be the face of the company. However, one of the reasons why you created this company is for more inclusiveness as far as like makeup brands, which ironically enough, this is something that my girlfriend has actually told me before, because she is very, very pale. And she talks about how, like, when she was a kid, there wasn't a whole lot of makeup for her color either. It was very in the middle. There wasn't much for very light or very dark girls. So this girl in this episode, she created the company for that. And so you would think the idea of reaching out to all these other countries and having other people be like, I'm Sadie too, is like, yeah, that's cool. You're all part of this thing, and you're creating this global company that's going to help all these girls have makeup that fits them. And it's part of your identity. And yes, it may not be your face, but that's kind of the point, is that it's everybody. Everybody can be a Sadie, like you are. So I'm like, that makes a lot of sense, but she still wants to be the face of the company. So I'm like, on the one hand, I get not wanting to let go control of the company that you have, because you want to make sure it's taken care of. However, at the same time, it does feel like you're kind of being a little selfish because you want your face to be on it. And you want to make sure that you're the one that's going around and be like, hey, I did this. And it was hard to get behind her reasoning in that sense. But I liked how it all came to a conclusion. I did think they were about to make the father a huge dick because they had that scene in the prison where he was being a little extra forceful. But I'm glad that we find out, no, he's a little overprotective, but he still cares about his daughter very much. And it seems like, oh, he's taking money. No, he's taking the money out to pay off this guy and pay for the medical bills of this guy that she blinded, to keep that story out of the press and all that. And I mean, it is a little, you should have told her about it at some point, but at the same time, I can also understand why he didn't, because she was a little mentally unstable. So I was glad that they made him a sympathetic character. He wasn't just, oh, I'm in this for myself and I want my daughter to be protected, but really I'm just in it for me, but don't tell anyone. Because I've seen a lot of shows do that before, so it was nice to see a little bit of a break from the mold. The other two kind of side stories going on in this one. First, you've got this stuff going on with Marissa. We've been getting a little bit more just throughout the season sprinkled in, and this one, I don't really know what's happening. She's going and talking to somebody off screen that we don't see who it is. I don't know if it's a therapist or something, but yeah, lying to her husband about the fact that she doesn't want kids anymore, just to hide the fact that he's not able to have kids, is a little messed up. I mean, I get it. I get she doesn't want to hurt his feelings. I get that she doesn't want him to be depressed about it. But at the same time, lying about something this big, it's kind of, it's a little, I don't know how I feel about it, because, I mean, in the end, he's still going to find out eventually, right? At some point, he's going to try, because clearly he seems like he wants kids, so at some point he's going to look into it and be like, hey, maybe we should have kids. And then, I don't know, it feels like this is the type of lie that you're doing it because of good reasons, but they're not going to see it that way whenever they find out. And I feel like it happens more often in like TV shows and movies. Like, most people, they don't keep this big information away from other people most of the time. It does happen. I'm not saying it's right either, but most of the time they tend to tell the people, hey, this is what's going on. But in TV and movies, it's like, oh, we gotta hide it for drama's sake. Oh, I'm not gonna tell him. So it's a little unrealistic in my opinion, but I'm curious to see what they're going to do with it. At the end, she's talking to Bull about this, getting this family attorney, so I don't know if she's looking for a divorce or if he found out and he's looking for a divorce. I don't know. It's kind of left up in the air, maybe a little vague about what's going on. Or I just missed it in her explanation because she was talking about it like from a third person point of view. So I'm like, wait, so this isn't for you? And then she's like, oh, by the way, there's no friend. I'm like, oh, so it was all for you. Okay, that was weird. And then the other thing is, of course, Chunk's daughter. I was just waiting to see like what's actually going on. So we find out in this episode that she is pregnant. And we also find out what she intends to do with that. I really don't know what to expect from here on out, just because I know, I mean, obviously this was made well before what's currently going on in the Supreme Court, so if this episode were airing around this time, around now, I would definitely know where they were going with it. They would be very much for, oh yeah, the daughter's totally right. What's funny, though, is in the very last episode that I just watched, before this one, they had a killing that involved a pregnant woman, and it was a triple homicide because of the baby in the belly. And granted, some people argue about, well, when does life actually start in the conception phase? So that's still up in the air, left up for debate. But it's ironic that in that episode, it's like, oh yes, she hadn't given birth, but there was life there. That's why it was a murder. And yet here, if they're painting like Chunk is in the wrong for wanting his daughter to go through with it, I can't really tell, honestly, because they didn't really leave it in a note of, oh yeah, Chunk is totally in the wrong for trying to force his daughter to do this, or, oh, can you believe the daughter's trying to do this? Look how much it's hurting Chunk. I don't really know what to expect, and I am a little bit worried because this is a very sensitive topic, and I feel like you can really divide your audience depending on which way you go with it. So I'm hoping they sort of stick to showing the pros and cons on both sides and showing how, yes, there are some points here, there are some points here, but not necessarily ever going like, oh, she's totally right, or oh, he's totally right. Because that's when, again, you tend to lose your audience, is whenever you tell one side that they're wrong in the way they're thinking. And that I've seen a lot of shows do that, so I'm not saying I would be surprised if they decided to go that route, but kind of hoping, just because, again, it is a very sensitive topic, and I don't want to discuss it too much, especially, again, because of what's going on currently. But, yeah, I'll be interested to see what they decide to do there, especially with her also wanting to go to Jordan. Like Chunk said, she probably shouldn't give birth over there, so if she does decide to keep it, will she not go on the trip? Or will she just decide to anyway? I don't know. I don't really know what to expect there, but I guess we'll see. But yeah, that's it for this episode, so on to the next one. I'll see you there. And now, episode 5, Billboard Justice. So on the one hand, some good moments in this. Good to see a guy like Nathan Alexander taken down because he's a scumbag, he's a liar, he's a raper. Obviously, you want to see those guys taken down. However, it does create kind of this false sense of what we should expect to see in our daily lives, because this has been a topic for a while now, with the whole Me Too movement and everything, and believe all women. What it creates is a bunch of women who see some powerful guy and think, I can make some money off of that just because I was around him for such and such amount of time, or a woman who just wants to get back at some guy who broke her heart, and so she's like, yeah, he totally raped me, and he can't say otherwise because I definitely know he did it. And it's just, there is kind of this feeling that in Taylor's situation, if this were real life, yes, it could have happened, but it's not always going to work out like this. This is kind of that, you want to see sometimes fiction in real life. You want to see guys like Nathan Alexander who are responsible for doing this time and time again and, constantly ruining these people's lives. Obviously, guys like that need to go down, and they deserve to go down. And sometimes they do go down. But then sometimes there's situations where this whole setup is the exact same, except the girl who is saying all of this is just totally making it up because she sees an opportunity to make some money. And sometimes, like, in the case of Nathan Alexander, obviously he's paying off these girls to keep them quiet. But in some cases, sometimes these guys will just, I have so much money, I don't have time to go to court for all of this, for all this BS and all this he said, she said, so take some money, I know that's what you want, just go away. So it's like, it's hard to really say what is real and what is fiction, you know? And that's where I do feel like sometimes episodes like this, while they are good and enjoyable from an audience's point of view to get to see, again, some scumbag taken down for something that everybody's like, well, there's no proof, you can't prove this. You know, this girl, she could be just saying this stuff, and even if she is telling the truth, there's no way to prove it, and all this stuff, and it just seems impossible. But then they find that one thing that manages to win them the day. You know, the ex-wife turns it around on him because he was such a jerk to her, and it's just like, yeah, got him. And then you come into real life, and it's like, well, let's go get that guy. Well, how do you know that guy's actually responsible, though? And let's go get that guy. Okay, he might be, but also, it's just one girl. It's not a whole group, so it's hard to really say if this. And yeah, it's a lot of gray area that unfortunately this show doesn't seem to take into account. Like, I think probably the best example of a story like this done pretty well, I remember being in Lie to Me, which is ironic because I know I've compared the show to Lie to Me before because of all the micro expressions and stuff that they talk about. But I do remember one where girl in the army was accusing her commanding officer of raping her. Turns out she was lying about it, and they find out she was lying about it, but she was lying about it because somebody else wasn't willing to step up. And it was kind of a big mixture of, well, you don't just straight out believe what she's saying, you actually listen, you look into it, you investigate, and then if there is something there, you look into it, and that's what leads to, oh, there were some girls who were raped by him, but they weren't willing to step up and say anything, so she's the one who decided to. And I like that kind of again, it leaves that gray area in there where you're not just, oh, well, you gotta believe this girl, I mean, look how heartbroken she is, she definitely seems like she's telling the truth. You do look into it, but there's also the feeling of, well, he still gets what he deserves in the end because he got caught. So I think this episode leaned too much into we're just going to get the bad guy. We're not going to focus on this possible gray area that does exist in real life. So it's just, in my opinion, it does leave out some of that to the detriment of wanting to see maybe a few more twists and turns and not such a straightforward episode, which is essentially what you probably expect going in. You expect this girl to be completely honest. You expect the team to find the evidence to manage to take this guy down and, you know, get her a settlement, but mainly to take him to court and win and expose him for who he is. And that's just kind of, I don't know, it's nice, it's a nice feeling, but also not very realistic. So the other side of this episode, though, is the stuff with Chunk. And that is probably being handled a little bit more realistically. And that's just because, I mean, Chunk really is dealing with a lot in this. And I'm glad that they're not necessarily showing Chunk as the bad guy in this situation. You know, can you believe he's trying to control her? No, he thinks he's protecting her. And so, of course, he's going to try to help her any way he can. And it kind of leaves off on a nice note for this episode where he gets the sense that, you know what, maybe I can't stop her from making the decision. I can't control her, but I can be there for her after the fact. You know, I think it's a mistake, and I'm going to be there for her because I think it's a mistake. You know, I'm not going to force her one way or another, but I'm going to be a father for her. And I like that. I like that message, and I feel like it's a pretty good message to have as well, because it doesn't, again, paint one side or the other in this light or dark scenario of like, oh, this is so good or this is so good. It's just like, well, both of you have your points, but at the very least, be there for her. You know, be the father figure for her. Even if you disagree with her, be there for her. Because it is a difficult decision to make. So whether you agree with it or not, in the end of the day, she's going to need somebody there for her after the fact. So I'm glad that that's kind of where it's going for right now. Again, they may still go back to the idea of one of them is going to be painted in a right light and the other one's going to be painted in a wrong light. But I really hope they don't do that, just because Again, you don't want to isolate your audience, even though most shows do. The last thing that I want to talk about is Taylor in this episode, and that's mainly because while obviously what she did ends up being a good thing and it ends up being a moral thing, and it's like, yeah, you stood up for her, that's fantastic. Still do need to talk about what she did at the beginning of this episode, because it's kind of one of those, you're not exactly right here. You're not right in what you did. And in manipulating the system and manipulating Benny, you still made some mistakes. Now, again, it came out with the right result and it was the right thing to do in the end, but that doesn't change the fact that the way you went about it wasn't right. And I feel like that wasn't really talked about. By the end of the episode, nobody's even talking about what Taylor did anymore. It's just like, oh yeah, we saved the day, we got the bad guy, woo, go us. And I feel like there should have been kind of a talk with Taylor, like, hey, I'm glad we took this case. I'm glad we got this girl justice, and I'm glad we took him down. However, don't ever do that again. And I just feel like that conversation should have been had, but instead, because the topic of conversation, because it was about rape and because it was about this girl that was, severely in need, suddenly it's like, well, everything she did was just fine, guys. I mean, we can just ignore that, right? And I don't know. I feel like that leaves open the door too much for people to sort of manipulate the system a little too much and manipulate the people around them, because it puts Benny in a difficult situation if this turns out to be wrong. So in the next case, whenever you see something, you're like, oh, I gotta help that person, then it turns out your gut is wrong in that sense. Well, now Benny's screwed and Bull is screwed, and I do feel like, not necessarily consequences, but I feel like a talk should have been had. And the fact that they didn't makes me feel like they really wanted to focus more on this idea of, oh, we gotta get these people who are rich and powerful and are getting away with stuff like this. We need to get them and deal with them, instead of focusing on, well, Taylor, what you did, not quite right. It's still not a good thing to do, even if you have good intentions. So it's just kind of one of my feelings. I feel like a lot of shows do this whenever somebody does something that's sort of out of line, but they do it for the right reasons, but then there's just no consequences whatsoever. And it's kind of ironic, because I was just talking about how NCIS had consequences for Gibbs that I felt like were too harsh and too unrealistic. And now here we've got somebody does something that's out of line and gets no consequences whatsoever. And I feel like that's too far in the other extreme. Like, there does need to be something said to her because of what she did to Benny. Because honestly, when she was doing it, I'm like, I know this is going to turn out okay in the end, but still, this is wrong. Like, you don't do that to somebody. You don't pretend to set Benny up on a date so he hears her story and now he's screwed out of talking to this guy tomorrow. Like, that's shady stuff. That's, I'm trying to think of the right word. Twisted? Not really. Underhanded. Underhanded is the right word. So anyways, that's it for this episode. So on to the final of these three. I'll see you there. And now episode 6, Into the Mystic. Not gonna lie, so far this season's been pretty solid. I wasn't really sure what to expect. Bull has not really been one of the top shows on my radar. Like, it's been okay, but there's definitely been some episodes where I'm not as into it, or I have a lot of problems. And I mean, not that every episode this season has been perfect. I mean, I've clearly had my questions. But I feel like they've done a really good job of just telling some engaging stories and really doing a good job of making sure that they're not so straightforward all the time. There have been a few that have been, but in this case, I like kind of all the different turns it took. Weren't really sure what to expect. They didn't show what actually happened, so there's a lot of question of, did she commit the murder? Did she not? Did somebody else do it? What exactly is going on? And there's a lot of different pieces involved that, as you come to find out, about this neighbor that might have been seeing the husband, and then on top of that, her Alzheimer's coming into play. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of good twists and turns that keep you really engaged and trying to figure out what's going to come next, what actually happened here. So yeah, I think this was a really enjoyable and solid episode. And it ends on a good note as well, where we see she takes Bull's advice, basically goes into trying to raise money for Alzheimer's awareness, and yeah, I mean it's a good ending for it. So I've been impressed so far. I've not that I've not had no issues with the season, but I think this season has started off very well, which of course pains me because I know next season's gonna be so much stuff that I'm not a fan of. But we'll get to that when we get to it. The other thing in this episode is, of course, Chunk. We're still seeing little bits of him and his daughter. Also, Marissa, her story is kind of popping up here and there. I think it was in this episode that she was on the phone basically talking about how somebody, or I think her now ex-husband, I guess they got a divorce, is like trying to take her half of the apartment or something. Yeah, it seems like this is going down as maybe a bit messier than she had hoped. And it might be because he found out that she had lied to him. Because I know he went to visit the doctor at some point, and we didn't actually see what the doctor said, but I'm pretty sure at some point the doctor was like, let me tell you something off the record now. So there's a chance that she might have told him the truth, and maybe he got pissed and decided to call it off. So now Marissa's dealing with all that, but just kind of happening here and there. Like, there's not these big scenes happening. And the same thing with Chunk. We have these one or two scenes in all these episodes where we see him dealing with this, and it's a little bit different. I'm used to these episodic shows. They'll have one character that gets kind of the focus for the episode, and that focus may come back. Like I think about Criminal Minds. You had, in the last few seasons, you had like Rossi dealing with being there for his daughter, and his daughter getting married, and him also marrying one of his ex-wives again. For Matt and his family, it was just about being there more as a father, as his wife is pregnant with another kid, even though they've already got so many. So trying to be more there for them while she's dealing with this pregnancy and needing to be on bed rest because she overworked herself. Garcia was dealing with some of her family trouble. So it was like all these different little stories were going on, but it wasn't like we just constantly got more progression on the stories in every episode. It was like we'd have one episode that might be focused on moving forward Rossi's story, and then another episode be focused on moving forward Matt's story. And that's kind of what it was for the last couple seasons until the end. This, it seems more focused on giving us the bits and pieces of each of the individual character stories moving forward. Like we see a little bit of Bull being there for Izzy. For Benny, we don't really have much on the personal side of things. Obviously he and Bull basically going to become uncle and kind of weird brothers in a way. But I mean, Chunk, what he's dealing with, and Marissa, what she's dealing with, they've sort of been just taking a few steps in each episode. Like Marissa will get a scene where she talks about what's going on, or she'll be off dealing with something that we don't really know what it is, but we know what it's about. Chunk, obviously, in every episode it's been something new, whether he's finding out more about what's going on with his daughter, or whether he's making decisions about what he's going to do with his daughter. Because in the last episode, that's when he realized, I'm going to be there for her. He had that talk with the janitor at the church, and he's like, I'm going to be there for her. Even if I disagree, I'm still going to be there for her. And he doesn't actually tell her until near the end of this episode. So it's a little bit different from the episodic formula that I'm used to, but I kind of like it because it keeps me engaged and it lets me remember, if I do take a break from the show, it's like those stories aren't just going to disappear for 3 or 4 episodes and then suddenly reappear again. It's going to be a consistent progression, and I like that a lot more. So, but yeah, as far as Marissa's concerned, I don't really have much of an opinion. Obviously, I do feel kind of bad for her, but I don't really remember much about how her and her ex-husband got together again. I do remember, pretty sure it was kind of sudden, so it's not like I'm super invested in that one right now. Chunk's story, though, I really like the conversation he finally got to have with his daughter in this episode. Just really good stuff. And again, I like how they're writing this story. Because I feel like a lot of parents would probably be the same way. That feeling of, I don't want to force this. I don't want to be the parent that's sitting here telling their almost adult daughter what she can and can't do. However, I still need to be there for them. Even if I disagree, even if I think it's wrong, I'm still going to be there for them. And help them get through this, because it's a difficult thing to have to go through, whether she decides to keep the baby or not. So I'm glad that they're really showing Chunk is taking what honestly is kind of the middle ground, because I do feel like a lot of people assume that you're either one side or the other, like you accept it or you don't accept it, and whichever side you're on, you have to stick there. But that's not how most people are, about anything in life. But I feel like that's kind of what our country has become. It's like we're either all the way here or we're all the way here. There's no middle ground. I'm like, no, there can be a middle ground. Like, just because I disagree with you on something does not mean that I'm gonna tell you can't do that. But that doesn't mean that I'm not gonna try to convince you otherwise, because I do still think that what you're doing is wrong, type of thing. That's kind of where there is a bit of argument, and obviously, not gonna get into those arguments here, but it's nice to see from a father's point of view, that's kind of where he is right now. He does think what she's doing is wrong. He doesn't agree with her. However, while he will try to convince her otherwise, because he doesn't want her to make a decision he thinks is wrong, whatever her decision is, it doesn't change how he feels about her. It doesn't change his love for her. And I think that's a really sweet story. And I'm glad that's how this story is progressing, because I feel like it's very realistic in a time where a lot of these shows probably would just focus on one side or the other being right, and the other person just seems like, oh, you're so hard-headed and stubborn, you can't see it my way. And I like that feeling. So, but anyways, yeah, that's about it for this episode, though. So 6 episodes in, so far, so good. And yeah, for me, I'm happy, because again, I wasn't really expecting to enjoy this season as much as I am. I kind of expected it to just be sort of here, maybe talk about it a little bit, but not really go in that depth and really get this much enjoyment. And I don't know, I guess most of the time for these CBS shows, I'm just expecting to turn off my brain and just watch. But it's nice that they're doing a good job of, again, keeping me invested, keeping me entertained. That's all I can really ask from a TV show. So, but yeah, that's it for me. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on these 3 episodes? Let me know, we can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Bull reviews, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Peace out.